Hey everyone, it's been a while. Um, there's been a lot of times over the last few months that I've almost gotten back on and recorded, but I've been really struggling and feeling very overwhelmed. I've been honestly feeling pretty consumed by some bitterness and some anger, along with some self pity. In the beginning, when it first started, I did recognize it, but um, I even had a moment where I realized, I think God was trying to tell me that if I didn't handle myself and catch the bitterness at the beginning, that it was going to cause some serious problems. Um, I think God was warning me about that. Um, but there was a lot happening. I'm not going to go into the details of all of it by any means, but I can say that I had a lot of important relationships um, that were being disrupted and continue to be disrupted. And it was really affecting me and it continues to affect me. Um, it's very hard. Um, then also, a lot of financial stressors, a lot of situations that I was kind of put myself into, and um, just it made me feel like because it was my own fault that I really couldn't ask for help, and so that didn't really help things either. There's some serious health concerns for my husband that has been pretty scary, and so just life, a lot of life stuff too, just kind of getting piled on top of all that. I've been feeling pulled in a million directions and feeling pretty defeated. My confidence has been at a zero. Just really struggling. Eventually, I found myself like drowning in self pity. That'll be a separate video because I don't really want to focus on that part too much for this one. Because in this case, it started with bitterness. It started with that just deep sense of feeling bitter about the world, about relationships, about even my relationship with God. I was finding I was feeling some bitterness in that. So I'd like to share with you a couple of verses and that I'm reflecting on and meditating on, I guess, praying on. The first one is Hebrews 12:15. It says, "See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many will be may be defiled." Sorry. So when I first um, noticed the bitterness, I needed to seek God's grace. Instead, I attempted to white knuckle it. Some of what was happening was my fault or my responsibility, and or others were convincing me it was my responsibility. So I rejected seeking God's grace because I guess I didn't feel like I deserved it. Um, that I was supposed to be able to handle it. That's what being a good Christian woman would be, is just to handle it, just to buck up. So the root of bitterness took hold and caused trouble, like the verse says. I made it worse, and I continued to make worse, bad decisions, and certainly was not being effective. Even if the decisions weren't bad, what I was choosing to do wasn't working. And my bitterness impacted others. I was snappy and not open to how God wanted me to behave, um, and how He wanted me to be. The word defile takes it even further. In my bitterness and in any um, unkind words or behaviors or attitude, Um, it the word defile means to desecrate. It means to profane something that's supposed to be sacred, and which is God's will. And because I was choosing bitterness and not choosing His grace, it was defiling that. So that's pretty heavy. And then in Ephesians 4:31 through 32, it says, all bitterness, anger, and wrath, shouting and slander must be removed from you along with malice. And be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another, just as God also forgave you in Christ. Notice that this passage orders bitterness, anger, then wrath. Bitterness grows into anger, which then builds into wrath. And these are emotions. And with these emotions, the passage then describes the accompanying behaviors, what kind of comes with it. And it also grows, it gets bigger. So in this case, it's shouting and then slandering and with malice. So slandering is attacking the characters of something or someone, and malice is intent or desire to do evil or ill will. In other words, we go from shouting and slandering to wanting bad things to happen to that other person or people. In other words, we get further and further from God's grace. But in verse 32, we see the way God has for us to keep that bitterness from taking root and to grow. Kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. These are opposite of bitterness, anger, and malice. They cannot coexist. So if we are in kindness and we show compassion, we have compassion, we are compassionate, and we forgive, it doesn't matter what the other person did or are doing. We're commanded to forgive as Christ has forgiven us. I don't want to lose that forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I don't know where I'd be without it. And God's telling us to give that to others too. So talking about this makes me think of a specific example in which that bitterness grew into anger and malice, and I did not behave so well. I definitely did not behave in God's example and the way He commands us in Ephesians to do. I was on an outing with some friends, and one of my friends brought another friend, and she immediately rubbed me the wrong way. I just was immediately angry and bitter the moment she started talking. In hindsight, I did gain some understanding of what was happening there, but it's nice to have that, but it doesn't even matter because that anger and that bitterness, and I ended up behaving in a way that I'm ashamed of. I not only was cold to her and refused to speak with her and just pretended she wasn't there. At some point, I actually looked at my friend and said, I don't like her. I don't like her. I don't want to be around her. I'm glad we left her behind. They did end up catching up, but I didn't want them to. And like I said, I told my friend this, and I was spiteful. And we got back, and everybody went their own way, and I sat there and reflected on that day, and I realized what I had done. And there was this opportunity to show this woman who God is and how He works in me by being kind and compassionate. I didn't have it because I'd let that bitterness take root. I did in the long run make amends and apologized. Like I said, I reflected on it and understood that it was a symptom. that I was feeling overwhelmed and didn't feel like I could care for one more person. And I think that should be a video at some point too, is that when God asks us to do something, it won't burden us. We won't feel exhausted or tired. If we're feeling exhausted and tired and these things are happening, it's time to stop and see and look at where we're putting our energy. Are we putting in God's will, what He wants? Or are we too busy trying to force this world, force our lives, force our situations to be comfortable for us? That really works. So, some thoughts that I jotted down that I'd like to share. It is so important that we do not operate from a place of bitterness. It doesn't feel good when we are bitter. It hurts others. It grows bigger and makes things worse. Problems do not get solved. It separates us from God's grace, which means we cannot receive His blessings. We definitely won't see them because bitterness shuts the door to them, and it shuts the door to God. God's still working on this with me. I am so grateful He loves me so much He's willing to teach me and teach my stubborn heart. So I hope that that if you're struggling with bitterness and anger and and malice and all the things that go with it, and you're finding yourself driving a wedge between you and others, or lashing out at others, or just, not living in God's grace, I hope this will help you and help you to take stock and to start practicing that kindness, compassion, and forgiveness. So thank you for letting me confess and hearing me out. May God bless you.